Cripples, Bastards, and Broken Things is the 4th episode of Game of Thrones, and this episode mostly focuses on secondary and very minor characters for the stories. Now, Ned's story is starting to be about what was this grand, deep secret that got Jon Arryn killed. And with that, he speaks with Grand Maester Pycelle, who then directs him to some said book that Jon Arryn used when he was still alive. And then there's also Sansa and Arya, who join into a tourney as the audience, and they just watch the melee happen, and they witness bloody events that most likely was very intentional. But before that, Ned's story, delving into this grand deep secret, he goes on a journey with Jory Castle within King's Landing, and he visits an armorer who harbors a little teenage guy who Ned briefly speaks to, and he asks him things such as the color of his hair. He asks him what Stannis Baratheon and Jon Arryn wanted from him, what questions they asked him which pertained to his hair, and he asked about the king and everything. And this led to Ned admitting to Jory Castle that they were just speaking to King Robert's bastard. So that will come into play, I'm sure. Now, alongside part of that story, Ned has Jory seek out Sir Hugh of the Vale. I believe he's from the Vale, but Sir Hugh, who was randomly knighted, and he used to be a squire for Jon Arryn. Don't know why he was knighted at all. Never really is explained in this episode. But Jory tries to talk to him that Ned needs to urgently speak to him. And of course, Hugh is snobby as fuck, because apparently in this world, in the medieval times, when you become knighted, you're just an arrogant, pretentious douche. And nobody means anything to you anymore. But because of that, Hugh completely declines it, and not in a polite way. He's training for said melee. Now, within this melee, it's Sir Hugh against the Mountain, which is Gregor Clegane as the Hound's older brother. Now, we'll get on to that later. Now, Jon Snow at the Wall, his storyline actually pertains to a very brand new character named Samwell Tarly, who is just now introduced in the 4th episode, and he has come to take the black. He's a very fat, very large, insecure, shy, very weak person. And Alliser Thorne sees that. Not even needing to speak to him, he just sees it on him. And Sir Alliser Thorne is basically a bad guy. He has some good qualities to him, but overall, Alliser Thorne's a bad character. So he puts basically all of his guys, all of his trainees onto Samwell, and literally trying to make him squeal like a pig, like the rightful thing that he is. Jon ends up intervening, because who the fuck wouldn't that actually has a good heart? And because of this, Alliser Thorne sicks all of his trainees onto Jon just to get back onto Samwell Tarly. Now, in doing so, Alliser insults Jon, calling him a bastard, insults Sam, calling him Little Piggy, and really the only person that's having fun with this, other than Sir Alliser Thorne, is Rost, who is another bad guy. Otherwise, it's Rost, Pip, and Gren sent to attack Jon to get after Samwell. Jon says to them before the fight, "You sure you want to do this?" Pip and Gren are both just like, "No, not really. You're my friend, and I just don't want to do this." Rost is actually being entertained, so as they're fighting, Jon knocks out Rost as per par for the course, and Pip and Gren just easily just yield. Alliser banishes Jon to go do weakling duties because of this insult to him. Now, later that night on the Wall, it is Samwell Tarly's watch, his first watch being at the Wall, and Jon intervenes, and they have a nice conversation, to which you don't just explore who Samwell Tarly is, you explore further into Jon's motivations and the like. Samwell comes from a high noble family, and his dad hates him. He hates how weak he is. He hates how he looks like a pig. He hates how insecure, shy, and how much of a loser he is. So Samwell's own father tasked him to go out into the woods and run from him and his noble house, and they're going to have a hunt for him. And if he doesn't want to do all of this, then he can gladly just go and take the black at the wall. And if he didn't take the black, his father was going to have a hunt, kill him himself, most likely, and then explain to his wife, Samwell's mother, how he died in a tragic accident. So Samwell decided to take the black because, honestly, anybody that gets hunted down by their own father, that's not really an event you want to experience in life. Even thinking about it, it's just a horrible thing to want to go through. So Sam took the black, and even taking the black, he's being made fun of for who he is. Now in another scene, Jon opens up to Sam about his definition of being a bastard, and that is a great explanation as to why he is also a virgin, same as Samwell, which that's an immediate way for both of them to bond together. And then cues Alliser Thorne introducing himself into the scene, and he sees Sam and Jon carrying along, having a good old fun time. Well, Alliser doesn't like that shit. So what does he do to that? He explains who he is then. I know, this is all just a clusterfuck of character development and monologues. It works though. It's all very well written, both in book and in show. But Sir Alliser explains why he's so harsh to his trainees, and he doesn't exactly explain word for word that. It's kind of implied, and it's very much understood. And this is part of the good traits in Sir Alliser Thorne, because he's explaining why he's so harsh on his trainees, because taking the black in the wall and not seeing what's beyond the wall yet, it's understood how you can be a very insecure and shy person, but when you experience what is beyond the wall, that is what makes you and turns you into somebody such as Alliser Thorne. So his character, who he is as a personality, makes total sense. He's still a bad guy in the end, the shit that he does just for humor, but he's very much very well understood as a character, and because of that, both book and show, super well written. So now, back into Ned, Arya, and Sansa, we get the melee, the jousting of Gregor Clegane with Sir Hugh. And this is a bloody end. So the melee usually doesn't have deaths. For some reason, Gregor Clegane kills Sir Hugh during the melee, and that's a bloody end to him, but it doesn't just stop there. Then, in everybody's shock, Littlefinger proceeds to explain to Sansa why the Hound's face looks the way that it does, explaining that when the Hound and the Mountain were kids, the Mountain had a birthday gift of a wooden horse, and one night the Hound wanted so badly to play with it, so he started playing with it, and one night the Mountain saw him playing with his wooden horse. So, out of brotherly love, Gregor Clegane took his little brother and pushed his face into the fire pit. Now, I loved all of this episode. I loved all of the writing of this episode. The thing I don't like, ever since the second episode, is every event in this show that has taken place in the books have 100% taken place in the show the same way. Or, well, I should say, they take place. But this fourth episode is a great example because the explanation of the Hound isn't exactly that way. So, in the book, after Sir Hugh gets murdered, basically, the Hound proceeds to take Sansa back to the castle, and therefore, the Hound starts randomly just spouting out this origin story with the Mountain and himself, and then that ends the scene. Whereas in the show, it's Littlefinger, and honestly, the show's version makes a lot more sense because why would somebody as as angry and hard-boiled as the Hound just randomly tell a pretty little bird such as Sansa his backstory. That part never really made sense in the book. Littlefinger confiding in Sansa makes a lot more sense. It makes total sense, honestly. Honestly, I prefer the show's storytelling of it over the books. But I still would kind of prefer the adaptation be pitch perfect. But that's fine. These little deviations from the source material in the show, for the most part, they do always work. And that's what I love about the deviations, especially in the first couple seasons. Whereas they are deviations, but they're the exact same stories, but different ways of telling them. And for the most part, they work. The end of this episode, or I should backtrack, Tyrion's storyline is he goes back to Winterfell after Jon requesting him in the last episode to please help his brother Bran since he has finally woken up from his coma. So Tyrion heads back to Winterfell, and Robb does not like him being there whatsoever. Tyrion ignores it basically and explains and shows off a way for Bran to be able to basically walk again and ride a horse. Basically putting a straddle on a very intelligent horse and having the horse be his legs for him. And out of that, Robb finds some kindness in his heart for this Lannister. Tyrion, of course, understands Robb's position, and he politely refuses, and he instead volunteers to sleep outside the castle walls. Noble thing, noble act. So keep that in mind. So the end of this episode, Tyrion visits a bar. And within that bar are a bunch of noble house clan members. And one of those clans and groups happens to be Catelyn in them. And Catelyn is already under the assumption that the cat spawn who had the Valyrian steel was ordered by Tyrion to murder her son way back a couple episodes ago. So Tyrion notices Catelyn, gives her a nice, happy greeting. In Catelyn's response, she explains all noble houses in said building, and then forces all of them to corner Tyrion and arrest him, basically, for conspiring to murder her son while he was unconscious. So that's where this episode ends. Now, another deviation from the book in this episode is that even before Catelyn makes her way to the bar, in the book story, Catelyn is actually on trail to said bar, and they explain they're too old, they need a place to stay for the night, let's stop trekking, let's find somewhere to go. Catelyn acknowledges that and accepts defeat for the night, finds a bar, and then while Tyrion is entering and applauding and introducing himself to everybody, Catelyn herself in the book is thinking about ways of trying to ignore this presence, or trying to find ways to scurry out or find ways to have an event. She's trying her damnedest to be invisible though, be a complete ghost, until Tyrion introduces himself. That's one thing I also didn't like about this episode at the very end. They just kind of cut away from everything that led up to Tyrion walking into the bar. Otherwise though, for me, this is another extremely solid Game of Thrones episode, very well told, some deviations, some really good deviations from the book that extremely helped the common sense and logic within the story and the storytelling, and then some deviations that are kind of bad. Overall for me, Cripples, Bastards, and Broken Things, episode 4 of Game of Thrones, very strong, 9 out of 10. Thank you.